All right. So the intro question today is going to be what needs to be questioned? Process, culture, and the organization. So this past week, we've been really talking about things that we kind of take for granted, assumptions that we have. Um, you know, Durgados, I know that you've kind of opened Pandora's box with this, and it's a really positive thing that we're going to get going through. So, um, but just kind of things that need to be questioned, like if you see anything in the community that we've been working on that needs to be questioned, whether it's processes, culture, or part of the organization, um, I just want to. This is going to be part of the ideation week. I just want to hear what your thoughts are, what you think we could do better in that sense, and then we'll pass it on. So, um, Durgados, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm munching on some breakfast cereal, but I will maybe get things started by saying my involvement here is mostly trying to bring awareness to the psychological shadow of the individual and how it rolls up into the social. Part of that is, using these differing mental models that I'm talking about all the time and the various graphics that I'm often showing. For example, what I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand is that there is a kind of narrative pendulum that swings between the individual self and consciousness and their developmental level, right? And then when they interact with the culture and worldview of others, right, they'll either sort of submit or comply or influence the developmental level of the culture and worldview of the group, and then we'll create systems on the basis of that. So what I'm trying, and then what will happen is then the system will impact the culture and worldview, which will then impact the individuals, and then it'll go back and forth as we iterate, right, and make this process better. So I'm glad we're engaged in the way that this is working. But having said that, I'm just going to suggest that, you know, um, the the primary thing is, I think, is just to take to try to understand that there are three different sections of how we need to work here. One is we need to assume that everybody who comes into the token engineering commons is going to bring with them some degree of dealing with an abusive system. That's why we're all here. We're trying to create different kinds of currencies, and those currencies are hopefully not extractive, not abusive, not you know um, asymmetric, all the things that we've gotten used to um, on the sort of normal side of the thing. But people aren't automatically just going to be like, oh, yay, there is no decentralization, Jesus. There's just, you have to show up and then you have to do the difficult work. And I think the most difficult work is look at the psychological shadow of the individuals participating and some of the assumptions that are made. So what I'd basically like to describe my autism as a kind of where to another person something might just take a fleeting moment. For me, I have to do an entire calculus about how it all works, right? So what I like to do is then pay attention to what might be a fleeting moment to a certain person and then expand upon that, understand all the component pieces of that thing, and then understand the ways in which I can make healthy choices all along the individual order of operations, so to speak, in that calculus, right? And so basically there's where we want to go, there's the centralized system, and then there's just the hard work of educating people into this new cultural vernacular. And I think we need to be aware that we enforce a certain kind of vernacular upon people. And in fact, we actually might force them to do a kind of code switching that you might be familiar with if you're a person of color. So I'm just suggesting that we take a look at the ways in which we enforce a specific kind of vernacular and the ways in which we ask people to do code switching so that they can sort of fit into our process. So code switching is kind of another name for a performative version of whatever it is that, because you have to do that to not be punished, right? So the question is, what in nonviolent communications, there's this request where you can hear no, and then there's a demand where you can't hear no, right? And I think a lot of times we're consciously saying, hey, anybody's here, everyone's welcome, but at the same time we have these subconscious patterns where in fact some of the things that we're saying are actually demands, and we don't even maybe realize that that's true. And so I'm hoping that we can use various tools like liberating structures and nonviolent communication to shine a light on some of these structural patterns. And so when I'm talking about structural patterns, what I'm talking about is the old extractive centralized abusive system versus the new decentralized, generative, compassionate, way of dealing with money. And so it's money, philosophy, and humility all combined into a single thing. And I think, we have to appreciate the mandate that Satoshi gave us. I mean, think about how humble a person must be to create an entire system that's freed everyone from all these things and then never talk about it, never reveal himself, never, you know what I'm saying? So he created this incredible technical achievement and all kinds of implications in terms of philosophy had to exist before he could create that. And then you would have to sit there on your hands while the entire world molds itself around your idea and never say anything to anyone. Those three things together are an incredible mandate for us, and I think we need to, perhaps look at that example among many other spiritual ones I could give you to move our organization forward. So that's my little monologue about it. I'm happy to hear feedback or anyone else's idea.
Yeah, would you like to pass it?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Wanka.
And Wanka, we're just going ideas about what needs to be questioned within the organization process and culture.
Yeah, I think it's not something that just applies to the TC, but to the Web3 movement in general, and
Yep.
is questioning if tools can change um, and have an impact on things that are human, like kindness. Are we relying on tools to be kind? Are we um, and this is something that I love, and it's the same. The first thing that comes to my mind, um, the speech from the great dictator of Charles Chaplin, where he says like, "We are going too fast, but do we are we sure where are we going?" And um, yeah, I feel that is a tendency to overvalue technology, uh, and think that it will have an impact without a social and a cultural and a human change, because we are talking about these new institutions, but at the same time we are seeing old institutions um, being threatened and being like in a very critical point. Like there's always a threat of war. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and how much technology is the real answer to the problems that we have in the humankind. yeah, it's just yeah, relying. How much are we relying on technology, on things that are more human, and that we are trying to make tools to do the things that we could do without them, but uh, because we aren't um, really focusing on changing ourselves, but to change our environment. Yeah, sorry for the rambling, and I will pass to Benz.
Hi. No, I think Durgados and Wanka, you've both made really good points. I think I think as far as like technology, yeah, we're super technology focused in this space, right? And I think some of that technology is necessary, right? But it's not sufficient if we're talking in like those terms, like having the technology to set up these non-rivalrous systems is what makes this way of being in relation to other people possible, right? Not necessarily, I mean, like beyond a small group. And I also think that in a way, some of the like methods I'm learning, and you all, Wanka and Durgados, are more familiar with, they're kind of technologies in themselves, right? Like they're methods and ways of uncovering things that were obscured. So I guess I'm just kind of going off Wanka's what you're talking about, technology. As far as like what needs to be questioned, I think there are things that we do take for granted, like you were saying, Wanka, that like because now we are building this technology that's a really, really important part, we let some of the culture stuff go that also has to kind of come along with the technology in order for it to bring about some of that change we're looking for. So I don't know if that was along the lines of questioning, but that was just kind of my thoughts.
No, I mean, honestly, that's kind of, I've always thought of, processes and policy. Those are the like main technologies, like, as much as like, a voting tool or a bonding curve. So, yeah. Do you want to pass it, Ben?
Yeah, I'll pass to Miguel.
Hi. I don't know what to say because I'm like new here and I like learning and yeah
Yeah.
I don't have nothing to say.
I mean,
I'm gonna pass.
it's one of those things where it's like, what do you think should be questioned when you think about like DAOs or decentralized organizations? Like, is there anything that you find that should be questioned that we take for granted? I feel like it's really interesting coming from somebody. I assume that you're a newcomer and you're just getting used to things. So like, it would be really interesting to get your perspective if you have one. If not, that's totally fine. You can feel free to pass it as well.
Uh, I don't know. Maybe uh, we can use maybe the experience with the new users could be more like attractive. I don't know. For example, for me, it's been like very difficult like to understand really what's happening here. Uh, I don't know. It's something that only doesn't stick in my mind, and I don't know why. But yeah, I think it could be like a better way for the new users or the new people coming here, and that they want to know like what's happening here. Maybe there could be like a easiest way to the new user to communicate. And I don't know, that's a thing that I can say now for my because my little knowledge from token engineering, and I will pass to Edu.
Can you hear me properly? Nice. What needs to be questioned? I think there is a macro scale of things that needs to be questioned, and there is a micro scale of things that need to be questioned. And I think the routinary aspect of an organization is something that needs to be questioned more often. We tend to worry too much about the grand scheme and the whole stuff and how we're gonna save the world and how these huge things, but then our daily routine is screwed up and our daily processes are screwed up. We don't have very easy to do processes uh, like updated, or we just take things for granted just because we have grown to use it like that way. So I feel that for me, we should question ourselves and our processes. And when I mean we and I mean our organizational processes as a human being, as a professional being, in a routine level, not only on a big scheme level. Because I feel like it's so, and um, I don't mean to be condescending, but I feel it sometimes feels so self-indulgence to worry only about the big scheme of things, and then when it comes down to day-to-day stuff or day-to-day activities or day-to-day organizations, and we do not compile that. We do not advance anything. We do not question anything because it's easier to just go by. So I feel that on my personal level, on a TEC level, I would love more questioning from a constructive point of view, a constant questioning that is incorporated into our processes. Like, hey, simple things like the manifesto. Hey, are we aware that the manifesto has not been updated in I don't know how many months? Um, all the informations from the working groups are updated. The TEC bot is updated. Like, are these calls format okay? Still, like, is this format for the calls are still useful for us? Does anyone who wants to change it? Like, just you know, um, I would love for us to question our status quo in a daily basis, on a daily routine basis, rather than worry too much about the big scheme of things. So I will send it back to you, Nick, because I don't know who has gone.
Can I just reply to that real quick?
Go for it, Durgados.
Yeah, just real quick. It was what you just said sounded an awful lot like this quote that I like from the Buddhist monk saying, "Everyone wants revolution, but no one wants to do the dishes." And so that's pretty much, I think, what I heard. So it's so beautiful that you just pulled that out of thin air. So very nice.
I'll pass it to Inti, I think is the last one.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think I pretty much resonate with what everyone has said. Especially these days that we have seen so much. I guess we can say issues or troubles in communities in the space, and so what I think we should be thinking more about or questioning is the value of the people, the value of the communities. Because, like for example, we like here in TC, as far as I know, the end goal is to provide people, communities with the right tools, so they can um, get a token that is able to help them get to the point they want to get. I don't know, but like the issue is it's not the token that's going to do the work. We just trying to make the token as helpful as possible. And so with all the technology and with all the experimentation, we are trying to break a lot of I guess rules or the status quo that we've had for a, I mean I don't know, for a lot of a super long time. And it's easy to get caught up, and it's easy to go back to bad habits and that sort of stuff. um I don't know. Well, this is more personal. I've been in communities where the development is pretty oriented to the technical stuff, but you have this problem where you, when you have like, sort of a technocracy, when when you have these folks that are doing an incredible work, developing, coding, etc., but at the same time they're having a great impact on a community they are probably not a part of, or a like they may not be usual community members because they spend most of their time coding and such. And you know, I think it's important for us to constantly level the importance of each part, because I feel like oftentimes we value, not like we value too much the people that are working on backstage, but it's easy to undervalue the community that's not being perceived as contributing as much work as you. Because I mean, you can go and see the amount of lines of code that someone did, but you can't really measure like community progress in culture. I think that's my take on it.
And Zepti, you were the last one. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. I mean, yeah, one process I'm still not. I'm just talking from the TC. One process I'm not so sure. Like I feel it's very centralized, and I think we could do better. It's like nominating stewards. I feel like the stewards are like the state's officials in a country, and then it feels like if you are not a friend of the stewards, then they are not going to nominate you. Then you are not friends by being friends, but if the stewards doesn't recognize you, then you're not in the stewards group working group. And then even if someone is pushing very hard and being very involved and being in the known, like have all the capacities to be a steward, if he's or she is not nominated, yeah, is not making it. And yeah, I think we could question it and this process, which was working just fine until now, but maybe start thinking on new methods to decentralize more the stewards. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
I'd like to follow up with that, if I can do so.
Can I
Go for
can
it.
I comment just briefly?
Yeah, go ahead. You do.
It's funny. I am sort of helping a little bit of to another DAO in their building up of their organization, and it's interesting because they have no central point of coordination. They only have nomination for stewards, and they elected stewards that were self-nominated, and they are completely lost because they simply have no coordination. They have no coordination kind of central point. They don't even get together, so they don't even know how to talk to the other working group. So there is this balance, and this it will change to every community, I guess. But interesting is that for certain processes there is a certain level to, not commitment, but I don't want to say about centralization, but there is a need for at least a point of of focus, if you don't want to say centralization, that is needed for a lot of organizations, and I feel this is not very far from that. The stewards processes could be improved by no means, and the election process could be improved too. But I think also that just this process of self-nomination and this community was empowered by self-nomination, and people were elected, but these people who were elected, who were not friends of anyone, didn't have the tools to actually be a steward. So it's peculiar to see the other side of the coin, how it worked out. So I think something in the middle will work properly.
Yeah, I think we could pick the both places. The both. We if a steward is self-nominating, that doesn't mean we don't have like the stewards call, retro calls, sprint plannings. I think this is very cool that we are doing in the TC, and this is awesome. I think like self-nomination is but including all the processes we have for manage the commons. I think that'd be awesome.
Durgados, did you have any comments as well?
Yeah, so no, I have more follow-up for Edu. There's a helpful graphic that I found that is really nice for taking a look at how, kind of like what you were talking about in terms of, so yeah, pick your confusion, anxiety, resistance, frustration, or never get anything done. And you can kind of see how that actually works out, right? So I think we do a pretty good job with that, but where we don't, right, we need some way to be able to say, I'm confused, or I don't know what's going on. It's because, you don't see the big picture. Maybe, if you're anxious, it's because you see all this stuff, but you don't know what to do because you're like, there's no way I'm going to participate in CAD because I just don't have the skills. So if I tried to, I'd be continuously anxious, right? So I think this kind of thing is this sort of thing that I think being a steward actually requires a lot more than just having time and enthusiasm. And I think that time and enthusiasm are certainly prerequisites. So, that for me is the skills or the incentives and resources side of the picture, right? So if you have time, that's a resource. And if you have incentive, that's your motivation. But you have to understand that you have to have an action plan. There has to be certain skills that are involved. And it's also true that what I've noticed to follow up with what Zeptimus was saying was that it's not just the voting process. So like how to break voting for me is, take a whole bunch of disparate sets of concerns and roll them up into an omnibus thing, so that's exactly what we did when we voted for the hatch, right? We were like, okay, here's a whole bunch of things that are sort of related to each other. We're going to talk about one or two of them most of the time. We're not going to talk about the other three for a lot, and then we're going to have a vote that rolls all of those up together, which may or may not work in the best possible way. And I understand that there are certain technical limitations to that, but some of that wasn't clear to me right until the end. There are just certain assumptions that we make that I think sometimes we need to think about. So I'll give you another example. It's going to tend to be true that a person who has a specific kind of training is going to have a kind of confirmation bias around that training. So if they believe that a particular working group should be focused on this one aspect of like 7 or 8 different things that working group's doing, then the working group's going to tend to focus on that, which may or may not suit the community best. Do you know what I mean? So there's just certain cognitive biases I think we all need to be aware of, and maybe it is, as if you want to be a steward, we need to come up with some kind of plan to talk about different confirmation biases, or to use liberating structures, which would subvert a lot of the problems that can occur like this. That's just my thought about. Plus, it's also true that by having representatives, no representative can fully represent that which they're elected to represent. So that's been true in Congress. It's going to be true here. So what are we going to do to make it so that this person that the people who are talking to them don't look at them like just a person in power who they have to give away their agency and autonomy to, right? So, these are all questions that I have coming out of the last month or so.
Thank you for that, Durgados. Yeah, I agree with that. I tend to, my big question thing is centered around stewards as well, but more on our perception of stewards. I think that a lot of times I don't think stewards do it themselves, but we've created these kind of practices that make stewards seem more important than they actually should be. And so, I don't think it's an intentional thing. I just think it's the way we structure and the way we've conditioned ourselves previously. That what Durgados talked about with these kind of centralized traumas of going, hey, I have a boss. I've always had a boss. There's never been a time I haven't had a boss. And so if you have this title of steward, I'm going to make that assumption that you are my boss and that what you say is the word. And I think that is something that's trained and something that stewards need to really take into consideration when we're discussing things, when we're leading calls, when we're, making plans. I think that's something that, we're just another contributor with the superior knowledge about this organization, and more in-depth knowledge. And so that's the only difference. But at the end of the day, we're just contributors, with a slightly different title, and that we shouldn't take that to the next extreme. And notice that when we do take actions, that it may have influence on people that don't know the difference, that don't understand that concept. And so, so that's just one of the things that I've noticed personally, and I've had that type of influence, and I kind of, wasn't aware of it until recently. And so it's very important as a steward that we have these conversations and talk about our influence. Yes, and did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're saying that because of the particular things that have been happening, that I just wanted to comment on that last. Even though these structures are said to lack ¿cómo que se dice? I'm sorry, se me fue.
Okay.
Even though these structures are usually lacking bosses in the traditional term, I think it's also important that contributors, because of course, for example, you're now a steward, and so you're trying to you're looking down at I guess less involved contributors, and you're just trying to um, level up the line so we are all on the same spot. But I think there's also some importance to hierarchy, and so even though we have to be always looking to improve and not to try to act as tyrants with and abuse the powers of positions like stewards. Also think that from an incentive uh, uh, point of view, it's important that you get some type of benefit from being more involved.
Yep.
So always being careful of what you do and what are your responsibilities, but it's also important not to try to put all people on the same level, because then what's the incentive to be more involved in a community?
Yeah, and that's part of the education process that we have, and we need to get better about educating people on the roles and the advice process, which we're about to go over. Because at the end of the day, like the entire goal of this was to have individual contributors. Like if you wanted to do something on behalf of the TEC, you have the agency to do that, and we want to equip you to do that. And you have the discretion to make that decision regardless of what a steward says. Now, if a steward says, I would rather not do that, it would definitely discourage a contributor from executing on a decision that they think is what's best. And that's
Yeah.
the type of relationship that I'm trying to figure out, because educating newcomers, especially to make sure that they understand that they have agency, that they have the discretion to act in the manner that they see fit, that they think is best for the community. That is the way a decentralized autonomous organization is supposed to operate. And so educating people about the agency they have to act and the advice process. So with that being said, I want to get into the advice process because it's something that we've been talking about for a little while now, but I think it's very important. So I've started these advice process pamphlets here that you can see. Decision making. This is just kind of a guide. This is just something I'm working on, and if somebody is willing to work on it, please DM me because I want to get these out. One of the things that I want to happen is to make sure that these guidelines are kind of easy to access, and a PowerPoint is not it's not necessarily a great tool for that. So I'm always looking for ideas. Jeremy actually came up with a really wonderful idea he just sent to me called the advice artifact, and this is a way to track and improve the process of using the advice process. And so, as you know, if for those who don't know, the advice process involves 3 different roles. We have the contributor, we have the subject matter expert, and we have the steward. So a steward in the working group, say the comms working group, maybe a contributor wants to make a decision based on that. The steward sees kind of this big picture, and everybody, just like that chart that Durgados said, everybody has like a missing component, but somebody has that missing component somewhere. And so a lot of times the steward will have kind of this big picture view that you may not have, and that information that you desperately need. And you can go to them during the advice process, as well as the subject matter experts who have the skills to make that decision. And so the way we want to do this is making sure that those 3 roles are incorporated within this advice process, and we educate people on those roles. And this decision artifact that Jeremy came up with is really interesting because it forces us to engage in a way where it says, hey, here's this little card that says, I'm trying to make this decision. I believe that by doing this, we will verify this and measure this, and we're going to engage with these people. And so it sends like an invitation. So it's like, hey, I'm using the advice process. I'm giving it to you as a subject matter expert. I'm giving it to you as a fellow contributor. I'm giving it to you as a steward. And then once you have all your information in one place, we can submit it and you can make your decision based off of that information. Now, these are just kind of dry, ideas. And so what I'm looking for in this call is just to say, does anybody else have any ideas around how we can better track, use, and make it more accessible, this advice process? And so if you have any comments, please speak up.
I think there is something that we could improve, and we can take it on from the orientation call. It's to bring awareness. I don't think we bring awareness enough about the governance relevance in our community. So just by positioning ourselves in a way that when someone enters the community, letting them know that they can actually propose, like that's something you can do. It doesn't matter how old are you on the organization or not. You can go through advice process for something, and I don't think we provide enough support and time and effort to push this narrative forward. That that we are open, because sometimes it feels that we say we are open on a very like human level, but sometimes we are not very clear about our processes, so people don't get involved because they are not aware that this process exists. So I think that adding this, actually had this conversation with Livy, to add this to the orientation call as an entry point, and just to identify which other kind of interesting main points in the process of a user is relevant for them to know about this. For example, if you add the header of the agenda, that we have open governance, that we have an open duocracy system, like having these little 3 principles across all the stewards agendas, across all our calls in the community call. If you just say at the beginning that everyone can participate and everyone can submit a proposal to advice process, I think it's something very it takes power out of the Softgov group. It takes power out of the few people who knows how to submit a proposal. But this openness implies that we will need to have a documentation ready for people, and that we have the people sort of taught on how to receive this and how to proceed. When if you suddenly start receiving 20 proposals, how do you handle that? So it's not only about making people sure that we are open to advice process for anything, but also that we have the structure to withhold this flow of information. That's my 2 cents, and I will pass it on to Wanka.
Yeah, I like the idea of making like artifacts. I think um, like what we practice becomes a culture. So if we want to make a change, it's just to start doing it. And I feel like I also agree that having different tools and being more competent in managing um, like these open spaces would be super important for the improvement of our of the way we reach our goals. So um, that's also very connected to the gravity call that we'll be following, because we will have a presentation of liberating structures. And yeah, I think that we all should continue learning every day and not like um, stopping our learning processes, because maybe as Durgadas said, like maybe there's something that we lack that other people have, and the only way to get what we lack is by learning from others, from the experience of what they have, and and becoming a more integral being. So yeah, I think that having tools, better tools, or more familiar tools to apply as a community can help to actually have all these what we say into a common understanding. The other day, I think some months ago, um, yeah, I was talking, I think, with Durgas, and he said like everybody though does a queue in the supermarket. It doesn't matter if you are a superstar. It doesn't matter what you are. Everybody does the queue in the supermarket. So it's just like we have to normalize certain practices that can become our culture. Yeah, sorry for the rant, and I will pass
No.
to.
I just want to add one thing to that, because I think you hit the nail on the head with that, is that we need to really, and myself included, is to normalize these practices, to use it as much as we can, because the more we use it, the more we engage with others, the more they say, okay, I'm going to use it as well. And so that's that kind of like conditioning that we need to have within the community. But yeah, NT, did you pass to you?
Well, before I say anything, may I ask, like, what's the advice process? Like, I mean, I sort of get the name, but
Yeah, I can go over it with you real quick. So the advice process is just a method for engaging with others about the decision that you're going to make on behalf of the community. So if you're in your working group and you have a small decision that needs to be made, or maybe it's a bigger decision, or maybe that you're using information that needs to be approved by someone else, you want to have an advice process to where you can go to subject matter experts, stewards, or fellow contributors, anybody, the stakeholders that this decision is going to impact, and evaluate your decision before you make it. This is kind of a core tool that we want to have for people who are going to make a decision on behalf of your working group, of behalf of your sub working group, whatever it may be. and to use this advice process, which you can find. Let me add that link real quick. Mhm. 1 second. Dun, dun, dun. So here's the advice process. So the idea is that you'll have small impact decisions, medium impact decisions, and large impact community advice processes. And each level, it has different guidelines for you. So you can signal each other about what you want to accomplish. You can get information from the community about it. Let's see. Here's a better image right here. So this is the advice process. Subject matter expert advice. Most of the time, a small decision that'll be made can be done with a subject matter expert. It won't need to be escalated to a community impact decision. And so we just want to have these kind of guidelines for you, if that makes any sense. That was poorly worded, and I apologize, but I hope you can explore more. Go ahead, NT.
Yeah, well, I think I guess the process then should be better internalized. Uh, it probably could be like from the top down, from stewards or expert matters down, because you're the guys who are more involved. Because I've been joining calls for this week, for the past week till this week, and this is the first time I ever heard about it. I mean, I'm not sure if, and I mean, like, we don't have to explicitly talk about the advice process, but I'm not sure either if that's something that everyone here is already used to. And so when I entered the tech, I know, even though I know it's called advice process, I know how to act in the community, because everyone else is acting a certain way. Um, and yeah, that's sort of a complaint I've pointed before about information. I think it's with the we use really complex tools, like, I don't know, Garden's conviction voting is particularly hard to grasp for pretty much anyone, but for any regular people trying to get involved in crypto or anything. And I don't know, also the ABC and such. And I mean, I didn't have much issues because I come from Wanka and I sort of get a lot of the concepts. But I get that someone new would be getting a hard time understanding about anything. Uh, I don't know. It feels like everyone's here is just, so much focused on work, which isn't bad. But I don't know in which point does someone new sort of get a sense of community besides work, and well, I don't know if that's, I don't think it's related to the advice process, but I think it sort of contributes to the whole community governance ratio thing too. I don't know.
Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I would like to add. Actually, there is an advice process regarding the how to we want to handle transparency around TC funds. I would love engagement there. And then I think also, having a lot of documentation is cool, but coming to reality, people do not like to read. So maybe we should also, have. I mean, right now we have an animation team, and maybe do a couple of videos and fun stuff like people watch it. And I think also it's very important to work in the narrative. I know like Gideon is probably start to picking this up, and then create a story, because what people want is a story, a big part of it, and then people will engage more. And yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the things that really bugs me is that, we're trying to make, I keep going back to Ostrom's and trying to make this, low cost, these processes extremely low cost, and the advice process at the moment is extremely high cost. It is very difficult to get people engaged with it, to get the right people and that are going to speak on this, to find the experts properly. It takes a lot if you want to go through the advice process, and so that's part of like why this is a big part of this agenda today, is just to figure out how to make it low cost and make it easier, maybe even more fun. But I'll pass it to anybody else who wants to talk.
Yeah, I don't think it will ever be low cost. And I have to be honest, we are not on a field of study that it's easy to understand, and even for PhD people. So I don't think it will be ever low cost. What will be low cost will be the act of governance, but the participation and what it takes to participate will always require a certain level of awareness it takes a learning curve to achieve. I don't think it's a thing of DC. I think it's a thing of the Web3 space that requires this, like, governance is very easy. You have a token, you can vote. That's very simple. You can comment on the forum. You like that act is very basic, and it's simple to execute, and we can lead people to that. But getting people to know what they are voting for, people getting to know how to vote, what it implies, how it affects their economy, how it affects their token whatsoever. It's a tricky part, and I don't think it's for everyone. What we can do is to allow everyone and have all the mechanisms that everyone can participate and engage. But doesn't mean everyone will participate. I don't think we should be harsh on ourselves on pushing this idea of everyone should be part of governance. But I do, besides this, before I pass it on, I want to acknowledge what NT mentioned about the loopholes on awareness of you not being aware of the governance or the advice process. Thank you for that. This is the kind of things that you just mentioned. We are so on like on a streak. We are like always working on something that we sometimes lose perspective. And this is something we have lost perspective of how important the governance is, that we actually, and this, just to put you in context, this happens because we tend to let know people manually about governance rather than having a general space like the orientation call mention governance at that point, so we don't have to actually bring awareness when you have spent 2 months here on the TEC, but you didn't know that there was a governance process going on. So thank you for that.
So yeah, I'm going to follow up with that too. I think those of you who know me are talking about contextualizing all the time, right? In terms of in what framework are we making this decision for who? There are really only two narratives within this section process. One is the point to get people up to the point of contributing, and then from the point of contributing onward, right? So once they're established and they feel comfortable and know, we need to do an onboarding such that it's easy to work with that. So the comms group is currently working on a HubSpot process, and we'll probably end up with an email automation that will gradually onboard people just by itself. So you should definitely attend calls. You should definitely do all those things. But it's also true that participation is the core, right? So it's a participatory. All democratic things are participatory. The extent to which you participate is the extent to which you're going to learn and be educated, and so on. At the same time, I think the thing that everyone's talking about is that if we're in a get things done mode or a people first mode, it's really reflective of how confused or how engaged people are. And so, I'm trying to, the liberating structures thing should help. I'm really going to strongly encourage you guys to come to this next meeting. It's really an amazing, many of the things that I've been talking about over the last year are already contained inside of liberating structures. So you guys hopefully can attend that. But I did want to show you that we do actually have a customer lifecycle journey, which has two narratives sort of built into it. So and I've been I'm getting more traction. I'm feeling on creating a coherent narrative within the TEC in many ways. So that's going to be improving as well with your help. So thanks.
Thanks, Durgados. And before we end this meeting today, I wanted to give the space for Benz to talk about his governance post. If you're okay with that, Benz.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Let me see if I can pull that up. It's pretty minor changes, just updating the forum post that Livy put together on that kind of outlines the entire governance process, and it's just inserting those parameters that so Goldilocks, and then there's like one minor change, and then I think the only thing that is, can you see my screen at all? No.
Not yet. No.
Not yet.
I don't know if I've done this yet. Really the only, I'm not gonna be able to do it right now.
If you want to send me the link, you can.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry about that. I'll put it in the SoftGov channel.
Okay. Can you see it?
1 second. Yeah. Yeah, so pretty minor changes, just inserting those. I pasted like the entire markdown. So if we're, see, I don't know exactly how we want to do this, but if we're good to do it, then I think Zepti, you can use like this markdown and just paste the whole thing. But yeah, essentially just inserting those, and then there was some text to change. If you scroll down a little bit, Nate, right there. I think this is the only edit that I actually made, and this was just a brief mention of like quadratic voting temporarily being unavailable. So aside from inserting the final parameters, like that was the only other change. So
awesome. Yeah. And so you're gonna just add this to the forum, or is this?
I posted this Google Doc underneath as a comment.
Okay.
I just can't edit the post.
Got you.
So if we're okay with this, then I think.
Yeah, I think the important part was the input of the parameters, and to stress the fact that the quadratic voting is not going to be available for the moment, right?
Yeah, just I guess until identity gets worked out.
Which it's a big task.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Benz. Yeah, so I hope everybody had a good meeting, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
I'll update the post, Bench.
All right. Thank you, Zepti.
Thank you.